Welcome to a webinar with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center Network Gateway to Exporting program. My name is Dante Di Gregorio, and I'm a consultant on the Gateway to Exporting program, as well as a professor at UNM's Anderson School of Management. I'll be speaking today about export opportunities for New Mexico small businesses. On this slide, I have an overview of the presentation. I will first talk in general about export opportunities that exist for New Mexico-based small businesses, and then I'll help you start to think about the issues to consider for analyzing what opportunities exist for your own small business and how you go about exploring and exploiting these opportunities. So first off, why export? Well, the obvious reason perhaps is that this presents new growth opportunities. The U.S. accounts for about 4% of the world's population, and depending on the industry sector, about 20%, or in some cases considerably less, of the total global market. And so really focusing exclusively on the U.S. limits your growth potential. Moreover, in many industry sectors, even competing just in the United States, you increasingly face global competitors, so it's important to engage these global competitors at a global scale as well. In many cases, your customer base may be increasingly global, and even if you're serving U.S.-based companies, those companies may demand that you serve their global operations in order to continue to be part of their supply chain. Furthermore, serving global markets presents an opportunity to spread your fixed costs across a wider range of markets and yield economies of scale that may not be possible just from the U.S. market. Additionally, by virtue of operating in a wide variety of different markets, you're exposed to different competitive pressures in each of those markets. This presents opportunities for learning and can enhance your company's overall competitiveness. And then finally, as we see with the recent economic crisis, which hit different markets differently and with different magnitude, this presents an opportunity to spread your risk across different markets and customers and tap into markets that may be growing at the moment more rapidly than the U.S. market is. So certain global level trends make it easier than ever for small businesses in particular to export. First off, following from the previous slide, as you're probably aware, we hear a lot these days about BRICS, or the big emerging markets, countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, but also Mexico and many other emerging markets which have been growing more rapidly recently than the U.S. economy. And in fact, even economies like Germany have been growing at a significantly faster pace than the U.S. economy. So this presents an opportunity. Another factor is that tariffs and non-tariff barriers have fallen around the world as countries unilaterally have opened up their systems, and the World Trade Organization has expanded its ability to promote a fair and open trading system. Innovations in transportation costs, including containerization and multimodal transport, have led to a decrease in overall transportation costs. And of course, communication innovations make it easier than ever for us to connect with global customers and to maintain those relationships on a global basis. So if we look at the U.S. level at the export markets for the United States in 2010, you see that these markets, our top markets, are Canada, Mexico, China, Japan, and the U.K. Overall, we tend to trade with countries that are most similar to us in economic terms, like, say, for instance, Canada, Japan, UK, but also countries that are either geographically close, Canada and Mexico, or countries that are not close but present a very different resource base and have a very different comparative advantage than we do, such as in the case of China. Now looking at New Mexico and what we export from New Mexico and where it goes, on this slide you see that the leading export markets for New Mexico products is not very different from the list for the U.S. overall. Canada and Mexico are still our number 1 and 2 partners, although in the case of New Mexico, it's Mexico that is our most important trading partner. But then from there, the list looks fairly similar to that we saw in the case of the U.S. as a whole. What are we exporting from New Mexico? Well, it really is a very broad range of products, with $1.5 billion overall in total exports. You see that the leading product, photovoltaic cells, accounts for only about 1/15 of that total, and the rest of our exports are distributed pretty broadly across a wide range of industrial goods, other manufactured goods, including some consumer products, but also natural resource goods such as crude oil, as well as some agricultural goods and processed foods and so forth. So turning to one's own company here in New Mexico, the first step is to look inside before looking at those external opportunities and trying to figure out whether your company is ready for exporting, and if not, what it's going to take to become export ready. So some indicators of export readiness are listed here. First of all, it's important to understand what is your competitive position, what is the source of your competitive advantage in the U.S. market, and is that source of competitive advantage going to travel well into foreign markets, and do you have the resources to take that into the foreign markets? Are your products and services well suited for foreign opportunities? Do you have the internal know-how as well as the commitment from top managers for developing these markets, which may take quite a bit of time and effort to really bear fruit? And other considerations, like do you have the production capacity and the financial resources for overcoming entry barriers such as regulations and licenses that may be required. So in terms of preparing a set of product offerings for international markets, a few considerations that you might take in mind is that there are a series of regulations and standards that will be relevant for international trade that may not be crucial at a domestic level. One good example of this is CE marking, which is required for the European Union. If you flip over your laptop or any other electronics, you'll see that CE mark, and that's basically an indicator that the product complies with the product safety and labeling standards of the European Union as verified through an external third party, which this is a requirement for competing in the EU. Another set of regulations or standards that is not a formal regulation is the ISO standards such as 9000 or 9001, which are a clear sign of international quality, and this is widely used by international companies to identify companies that are ready to serve global markets. There may also be industry-specific standards that exist within your own specific industry that you should be aware of. At a national level, each country maintains its own labeling and packaging laws, and apart from laws, you need to also be able to prepare your promotional materials, your website, anything on your product specs and so forth in the language that is relevant for those markets. So how do I go about identifying and evaluating international market opportunities? In general, companies start by entering markets that are close to them, and this proximity might be in geographic terms. As we mentioned, Canada and Mexico are our top trading partners for both the U.S. and for New Mexico. This might be proximity in economic conditions, particularly in consumer markets when you're looking at selling to consumers with similar levels of disposable income. This may be proximity in a cultural dimension, particularly for industries where culture really matters, such as consumer products again. Or that it may be a question of proximity in terms of regulations and the institutions or even the physical infrastructure required for your products and services. But while in general proximity is usually determines which markets companies enter first. By no means does this have to be the determining factor, and that in fact we've seen examples of small businesses in New Mexico that have initiated exports by exporting to places like Georgia or Chile or other markets like that. So where do you turn for information sources to figure out where the opportunities are and to assess those opportunities? Here's some potential sources. They include trade statistics, which I'll present some information in the next slide on this. Economic and overall market indicators. In some cases, you may need to be creative in the indicators that you tap into. In particular, if you're looking at exploring a market that truly is untapped, then you may have no data to rely on whatsoever. And so you might need to look at other markets that are similar to the country you're interested in, but that have already developed into markets and extrapolate from there. Industry associations and trade journals and trade shows can be a great source of information, and this includes even your domestic trade shows, which will generally draw a number of international participants. And of course you should rely on your existing partners, both domestic and international. A few data sources for export statistics. First off, you should be aware that there's something called an HS code, a harmonized system code, for every product. That is a code that can be viewed at the 2-digit, 4-digit, 6-digit, 8-digit, or 10-digit level. And we're most interested at the 6 and 8-digit levels. 8-digit level code is what determines your tariff rates, and so you need to know that 8-digit code to figure out what the relevant tariff would be for bringing that product into another market. Most of the statistics are available at the 4 or 6-digit level, and so at that level of specificity you can identify how much of a market currently exists in different countries for your specific product. And you can look at this over time to help you identify where the established markets are, but then also what are the new and emerging markets that exist. What about tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and business regulations? Well, these days, thanks to unilateral trade liberalization as well as the World Trade Organization, tariffs are now low for most products in most countries, but not everywhere and not all products. Most countries now have searchable tariff databases, so you can figure out whether tariffs matter. And the important thing is to understand what your tariffs are going to be so that you can figure out whether that's going to make a significant impact on the viability of the market. Other sources for business regulations more broadly include the World Bank database called doingbusiness.org, which is probably more relevant for domestic entrepreneurs, but it's also useful for foreign companies looking to enter the markets. And I highly recommend the Economist Intelligence Unit's country commerce guides, which are produced for more than 50 different countries and provide a good overview of the business regulations and the business environment in each of those countries. So there's a range of documentation associated with exporting. Then you should be aware of the general procedures, and of course you can rely on intermediaries for a lot of the specifics. So a commercial invoice is a basic document accompanying international shipments. Exports from the U.S. require a shipper's export declaration, a U.S. government form, which is fairly straightforward. In select cases, such as highly sensitive technologies that may have military applications, there may be export licenses for your product, and you may fall under a set of regulations called ITAR, which presents a number of barriers to overcome for those sort of companies. For trade within North America, within Canada, US, and Mexico, a certificate of origin is required, and this establishes that the majority of the value added for your product is derived from the Canada, US, and or Mexico, and by doing that you're able to avoid any tariffs that may exist in either Mexico or Canada. A bill of lading is a basic document that establishes which party has title to the goods as they're shipped internationally, and there may be a variety of documentation required by the importing country, and this will vary from country to country. And as I mentioned, there are a number of intermediaries that can help you with that process. Oftentimes those are the same intermediaries that help you with the logistics process. So a customs broker may be affiliated with a freight forwarder. That freight forwarder will help you manage the logistics. Most commerce these days travels through multimodal transport. So one shipment might be containerized and then move from truck to train to ship to train back to truck before it hits its final destination. That freight forwarder will be the one to facilitate that whole process. Incoterms are a sort of common language used in international transactions to specify which party covers the different expenses associated with moving the product, overcoming trade barriers, handling insurance, and so forth. And if you're going to be developing export markets for your business, you might benefit from knowing about ATA Carnet, which enables you temporary imports, such as for bringing products in to attend an international trade show or to demonstrate for potential international partners. Now, when beginning the export process, companies have a choice to make between more direct forms of exporting versus more indirect forms of exporting. At the extreme, a very direct form of exporting would entail internally managing the entire process with your own staff, perhaps developing an international sales division and taking on those extra responsibilities internally, which has the benefit of control and the learning benefit that over time that learning is accumulated internally. But obviously there's a cost that's associated with that. And so many companies opt for more indirect forms of exporting, such as through representatives or agents, which may be employees of the company, or they may be independent third parties with a contractual relationship. Distributors are generally different from representatives and agents in that they actually take title to the goods and then they turn around and resell them. Export management companies are generally located in your home market in the US and would help manage the entire process and charge a commission for any sales that result. And then at the extreme form of indirect exporting would be piggybacking, whereby you simply sell to your domestic distributors, and if they turn around and re-export it, then you benefit indirectly through that. But obviously, you have very little control in that process. Beyond exporting, there may be a number of different international business opportunities that are not best exploited through exporting. Different modes of entering other markets include foreign direct investment, which may entail going it alone through a wholly owned joint venture, a wholly owned subsidiary, or through a joint venture with perhaps with a foreign partner who also takes an equity stake in the venture. Licensing and franchising are very common, not only in, say, fast food and service sectors, but also in technology areas. Strategic alliance is a broad term for any sort of partnering activity, such as co-marketing, which may entail finding a foreign partner, tapping into their resources and capabilities, and sharing your own resources and capabilities for bringing their products and services into the U.S. market. And then, in addition to market opportunities, there may also be opportunities to source key resources abroad, which of course can help you enhance your own competitiveness, and in turn you can exploit that enhanced competitiveness by expanding on the sales side globally. So On this slide you have some links to some additional resources. In particular, I recommend the Small Business Administration's Export Business Planner, which is a valuable resource that expands on much of the information contained in this presentation. The U.S. Department of Commerce maintains offices throughout the world in our various embassies and consulates, and their portal for all their services is export.gov. And then finally, I've included the link to the New Mexico Small Business Development Center Network's Gateway to Exporting program, and we are glad to serve as a resource for any New Mexico small businesses that seek to either initiate or expand their export